Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone had a great week. Uh, we were traveling last Friday, and we were traveling again yesterday. So that's why we're doing this on a Saturday. Uh, we finished up with our Bible conference Wednesday night. Then we went to see the Ark Encounter up in northern Kentucky. See the shirt? Faith Like Noah. Uh, what an awesome experience. Excuse me, excuse me, but Ken Ham was there, and if you know anything about him or Christian apologetics or anything, he's the one that started the Ark Encounter. He developed it, he got it going, he's the brains behind it. He did all that, and he was there. He world-renowned preacher and apologist, and what an awesome experience just to hear him and to be able to experience that whole thing. We had a great week of just teaching and fellowship and spiritual renewal. If you ever get a chance, all I can say is I don't want to spoil your Ark experience, but if I ever get a chance, all I would say was you need to go. You really need to put that on your bucket list, and you really need to go see it. So much has went on that I just had to pick a few topics, obviously, but I wanted to update you guys. A lot of different elections took place last Tuesday, as you know, and there was some good news and there was some bad news. The Republican, I want to touch on this. It's been everywhere. Everybody's talking about the Virginia election, right? So we're going to be no different. We're going to talk about the Virginia election. But the Republican, Glenn Youngkin was his name. He won the election in Virginia, and the vote was 50.9% for the Republican candidate, Youngkin, and the Democrats was 48.4%. Now, once you consider all the population density of Northern Virginia, which is basically Washington, D.C., right? So once you figure all that, you know that that's going Democrat. That's going completely Democrat, and that's the majority of the population. So the rest of the state went Republican. That's a good thing. The main topic in this election that sealed the deal was the issue of parents' rights. In the public schools, if you kept up with any of this, they didn't show enough of it like they should have. But what the incumbent, if you remember, the Democrat, I'm going to give you a little heads up in case you don't know all about this. But in Virginia, they have a different law to where the incumbent cannot run again for re-election. That person cannot serve consecutive terms, okay? They can serve a term and then sit out a term and then get voted back in, but they can't serve consecutive terms. So Ralph Northam was the governor. He couldn't run. So basically it's like an open seat, okay? So what the Democrat candidate said was that he wanted critical race theory in the schools, and this is what got him in trouble. This is what he said. He said that the parents, quote, should have no say-so in what the public schools teach their children. That's unbelievable. Are you kidding me? The parents should have no say-so. Even some liberal parents, they said that this is crazy, that this is insane. There's absolutely no way that we're going to go along with this. So a lot of the Democrats even voted for the Republican candidate. Parents have every right. As parents, we have an obligation even, right, to see what is being taught our kids and to have a say-so in their education. And to be told that parents have no say at all in what the school teaches your kids. But that's the socialist agenda. That's the communist agenda. I'm not just throwing words out there for shock value. That's what it is. They think that the government knows best and that they're supposed to totally have everything to do with education. The parents would have nothing. But that's what got him voted out. But what really surprised me, if you remember the numbers I told you, 50.9% to 48.4%. That's what surprised me, is how close it was. Now I realize that there's other things on the agenda. I know that there's other issues that people care about, not just the school choice and the education issue. But you would think that even with that issue being so front and center, and him just being so blatant about it, you would think that it should have been 90% to 10, but it wasn't. It was still almost half. That's what's scary about it. The New Jersey governor's race, if you saw anything about that, now that's a different story. New Jersey is an overwhelmingly Democrat state, right? And Whereas Virginia, they're what we call purple. You know, red is supposed to be Republican and blue is supposed to be Democrat. So if it's like 50-50, they call it a purple state, meaning it could go either way. And that's what Virginia's been for the last couple of elections, but not New Jersey. New Jersey is solid blue. And that election was very close. It was neck and neck, which was very surprising. The Republican was not supposed to even get close. So here we go again. Guess what happened? If you saw this on Fox News or anywhere else, late into the night, it was still too close to call. It was 50-50, right? And then when Fox News showed the picture of it, all of the counties that had not reported their votes were, guess what? Heavily Democrat counties. Like 100%, it's where all the Democrats live, right? And those are the boxes that had not turned in the votes. And lo and behold, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, when they turned their boxes in, the Democrat candidate had enough votes to pull out the election. Does that sound familiar? Let's go back a year or so. That sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? You know, something has to be done about these elections. I know that. And everyone's been talking about it for over a year now. Some states have actually done some things. Some states have actually tried to put some guidelines in place to where it's just not open cheating. But then you have the other side that's fighting against it, saying, oh no, you're just trying to keep people from voting. This drives me crazy. I wish I knew what part of showing your ID is harassing you. What part of proving who you are to vote, how is that a problem? But it is. And how in the world is it okay for certain precincts in only certain areas and in certain locations to not have to turn their ballots in? Like the vote will be over at 7 o'clock at night. Well, it'll be midnight and they still haven't turned them in. How is that okay when everywhere else has turned their ballots and their numbers in? That's what happens in a lot of these precincts and a lot of these districts. Honestly, that's why people have such an issue with it, because it looks like they're waiting to see just how many votes they need to put their candidate over the top, right? They let everything else come in and they look and they say, hey, you know, we're behind by 20,000, so we need to come up with 30,000 votes. And that may not be the case. It's just that that's how it looks. That's how everybody sees it. And it's very odd that 100% of the time it's Democrat counties that do this. It's never a Republican box. It's never, ever. Y'all can look this up. Never one time is it a Republican-dominated county that waits 5, 6, 7 hours to turn their ballots in. Never. So, what can be done about it? Probably nothing. It's just frustrating, right? It just doesn't make any sense for this to continue. Some more good news. Minneapolis defeated a bill that would have completely done away with the police department. You know, it's hard to imagine that any sane person could have even come up with this. But they did. This was on the ballot to totally defund and disband the police department and replace it with like a community organizing type thing. It's just unbelievable. But believe it or not, sanity prevailed in this one election, and the residents of Minneapolis said, no, we're not going to vote to totally do away with our police department. Thank goodness. But let's use common sense. The socialists will not give up. They will not give up on this, and they will repackage it and try again. We know that. That's just what they do. They're not going to stop. But I did forget one thing. I need to back up to Virginia for a minute. Winsome Sears was elected the lieutenant governor, and this is a very conservative candidate that just happens to be a black woman. It's the first time I think that a woman has won a statewide election like that as far as governor or lieutenant governor in Virginia. It's pretty awesome. But she's a former Marine. She immigrated to the U.S. when she was 6 with her family. She is smart. She's well-spoken. And she's just awesome. If you get a chance, and then look it up, because it's a name that's kind of catchy, you know, Winsome Sears. So you'll remember her name. Here's what she said. If you know anything about the liberal news media, then you've heard of Joy Reid, right? She's on MSNBC, and she is a fanatic liberal. And she blames everything in the United States, every issue that we have, she blames on race. That's just what she is. She's a race baiter. And this is what Miss Sears said to her, quote, "I dare this progressive news anchor to invite me on her show to have a real discussion about race and politics in America." I would watch that interview. I don't watch MSNBC, but I would turn it over there for that one, because this lady would eat her lunch. So hopefully they can line up some type of debate or discussion. I wish they would. A couple of highlights. The socialist candidate lost in the Buffalo, New York mayor's election. That's good. That shows that some people in Buffalo's got some sense. But Michelle Wu is her name. She ran on the Green New Deal platform. She won the mayor's race in Boston. Openly socialist, openly said what she wanted to do. She's going to completely transform the city with this Green New Deal. And I use that phrase like you guys know what I'm talking about. I hope you do. It's not just a great idea to let's, start using some clean energy. It's not just about that. You need to look it up, and for this lady to openly run on that, and then the majority of the people in Boston voted for that, that's a little shocking. I mean, it wasn't even close, the election. So it'll be real interesting for us to see in the next year or two just how much money Boston is begging the government for to bail them out of bankruptcy, which is what's going to happen. But believe it or not, here we go. From each side of the country, different places showing different common sense values, but Seattle, Washington elected a Republican as their city attorney. No Republican, no conservative gets voted in anything on that left coast over there. So for Seattle to do this, it caught my attention, so I looked it up. Because the opponent, the Democrat, declared that, get this now, this is what he campaigned on. It's in the papers, all over the news. He said he would stop prosecuting any misdemeanor crimes, and he wanted to abolish the police department. Well, Seattle's a major city. You can't just do away with the police department. It's like Minneapolis. Some of these progressive liberals are wanting to do this stuff, and then common sense people are sitting down saying, you know what? We really can't do away with the police department. So even out in Seattle, some people are waking up. That's pretty awesome. So they voted this guy in, and we'll see what happens. And hopefully you guys saw this feel-good story of the year. This furniture truck driver, big truck driver, he won the New Jersey Senate presidential position in New Jersey. He's a Republican, and New Jersey has been at the forefront of these lockdowns and these shutdowns and all this stuff that the people have had enough. They just had enough of being told what you are and are not going to do, and to totally shut them down. This is what won this guy the election. But the Democrat incumbent, the guy that was in there, he spent over $1 million on this campaign, and this truck driver spent $153. That's how much he spent, and he won this election. So this is great stuff, man. His name is Edward Durr, D-U-R-R. If you get a chance, look it up. I think that the Republican committee up there spent a few dollars on some campaign stuff, but the guy himself spent $153, and he won it. So, but the people are just sick of COVID restrictions. That's what he said. He said, people are not voting for me. They are voting against these policies and against this Democrat agenda, and I just happen to be the guy. So he wasn't trying to be arrogant about it at all. He seems like a great guy. But we'll see what one guy can do against the political machine, right? It's going to be tough. But overall, just giving you guys a heads up, overall, it seems like a lot of common sense sanity was shown during the elections around the country Tuesday. You have pockets like Boston. Go figure, man. I don't know what they're thinking with this Green New Deal thing, but in other places, some sanity was shown. Will it continue? We got 1 year between right now and next year. November 22 is when the congressional midterms are. A lot of positions are up for vote, and is this movement going to last till then? I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But if I had to guess, I'm not being pessimistic. I'm just looking at what's happened in the last couple of years. If I had to guess what's going to happen, in a few months we're going to have another emergency, right? Something's going to happen. There's going to be another variant of this virus, or there's going to be something. There's going to be some emergency that they always come up with to try to scare people to death or try to blame something on the other side It's not going to be just nice and everything goes good until next November and then we elect the best candidate. That's not how politics works in Washington. And we all know that. Will we see some type of election shenanigans again? You know, will we not know who won until 7 o'clock the next morning? Maybe so. I don't know. It looks like New Jersey did it again and got away with it. So, you know, Biden is still pushing this moronic vaccine mandate. I wasn't going to talk about this too much because it's still up in the air. If you watch some of the news yesterday, they just made it sound like it was a done deal, but it's not. Reuters reports that it'll go into effect January the 4th. Now, a lot of big and small businesses are complaining. Lawsuits are pending. I know that, I'm going to say it's Arizona, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida. Several states have come together and they filed a joint lawsuit. All this I read today, where they filed this joint deal to stop the OSHA mandated penalties and the regulations for this mandate. So, regardless of what you hear on the television for the next few days, it's not done. It's not over, and there's still a lot of lawsuits. There's small businesses, big businesses, everybody's complaining about this. It's just a bad thing. But y'all know how this drives me nuts about this vaccine, so I'm going to try not to get too much on this soapbox. But I'm going to reiterate this again, because somebody told me the other day, at one of the meetings that we were at, some people were talking, and this one guy said, he said, you know, we've always had to take vaccines. I remember taking the polio vaccine. What's the difference? And I said, because when we took the polio vaccine, we couldn't catch polio. That's why it's called a vaccine. A vaccine provides immunity where you cannot catch that disease. No one on this show or that has anything to do with this is anti-vax. That is not it. If it was a vaccine that when you take it, it has been proven to keep you from catching the disease or the virus, so be it. That's a good deal. That's great. That's medical technology at its finest. But that's not what this does. Think about it. When you give your kids the measles vaccine, does that mean, okay, well now my kid will just get a little bit of the measles? No, that means they can't catch the measles. So this shot, when you keep shoving something down people's throat that does not meet the definition of the word, that's what drives us crazy. Let's call it what it is. Let's tell the truth about it, and then you wouldn't have so much backlash about it. But when you try to snowball people and try to make people believe something that is not facts, well, then we get a little apprehensive about it, right? That's the whole thing. Let's look overseas for a minute before I run out of time. Israel's still dropping hints about their plans concerning Iran. You know, like the 10-week window's passed, and they have not done anything, which is surprising. But the Jerusalem Post reports yesterday, Prime Minister Bennett, in a press conference Thursday, he said, quote, Israel will do what is necessary to protect itself against the Iranian existential threat. End quote. World leaders have scheduled a meeting in Vienna on November the 29th to discuss renewing the 2015 nuclear deal. Now, you've heard me talk about that on here. That is awful. That's one of the good things that Trump did was get us out of that deal. Because all this does is legitimize their nuclear program in Iran and gives them a chance to be able to continue with the nuclear program up to a certain amount. Well, then they won't let you check the amount. They won't let people in there. So all you're doing is allowing them to legally do it. And that's what Israel don't want, and they're not going to allow that. But Bennett also said, quote, we will not tire, we will be relentless, we will do what we need to do. As soon as he said that, the Iranian president, Raisi, came out and said, Iran will not back down in any way. So they're definitely starting to throw these jabs at each other, right? If this was a boxing match, they're jabbing. They're trying to feel the other one out. But this is definitely headed for a showdown, and let me tell you, Israel will win. 100%. How do I know that? Let me read you Amos 9:15 real quick, where he says, and I will plant them, talking about the nation of Israel, God is the I. He says, I will plant them upon their land, and they shall no more be pulled up out of their land, which I have given them, saith the Lord thy God. Israel ain't going nowhere. And you can believe that. Ezekiel 28, Micah 4, I could have given you several different scriptural references where God wants us to know plainly that Israel's not leaving. Once they came back, in 1948 that happened, they're not leaving again. So we need to remember that. They will not be destroyed by nuclear Iran, or anyone else for that matter, right? A couple other things, it's some bad stuff, but we've got thousands of people today. I talked about Nigeria a couple of weeks ago when I was on here, and now it's Ethiopia. They've got a civil war in Ethiopia, and thousands of people are dying over there every week. It's awful. Amir Zarfati keeps up with this stuff, like I mentioned all the time. He reports it's in Afghanistan and Yemen. They're experiencing suicide attacks every week. People are strapping bombs on them, going into the mosque, just trying to keep terror, just trying to keep confusion up. And didn't we know that? As soon as we leave, that's what's going to happen, and that's what happened. The Blaze reports also, it finally came out, we finally got some numbers to where 14,000 Americans were left in Afghanistan. Do you remember the lie that Jen Psaki wanted to tell all of us? Well, there's just a few hundred that were left. Well, the numbers finally came out from the Pentagon. 14,000 Americans were left over there, and as of this morning, when I looked it up again, the Pentagon reported 439 American citizens are still there. Still. You know, the news cycle moves on to the next thing, right? Well, it hadn't ended. It's still a nightmare over there for these people. And that's what this administration did. Intentionally left 14,000 Americans there. Weeks and weeks later, we still got almost 500 left stranded over there. That's what's going on. And my goodness, I'm not going to have time to talk about this because I really don't want to. But they're in the middle of the big, you know, all the world leaders got together and they're in the middle of the big climate change meeting in Glasgow, Scotland this week. Expect a lot of fear mongering to come out of this, right? If you'll look back in the, I'm going to say the early 90s, it was probably 91 or 92, you can find this easy. But they put out, the UN put out a report then that said that if we don't stop climate change immediately, by 2000, all the coastal areas of the world would be flooded and be inhabitable. That didn't happen, right? Now it's the same thing. Keep people scared, then you can get their money. Is there global warming? Yeah, you know, temperatures go up and down. I'm not going to get into that. I don't have time. But it's just a bunch of fear-mongering. So don't be surprised when this meeting wraps up at the end of the week. That will have been 2 solid weeks for these people to be over there and come up with new ideas on how to pressure each nation into giving them more money. That's what the UN wants, is more money, and that's what they're going to get. But the big climate change thing, oh my goodness, in Scotland of all places. I'm going to try to find one scripture that I want to read you guys before we go. But this too, before I forget, kids 5 to 11 now have to show proof of vaccination to enter any indoor activities in San Francisco. So a kid 5 to 11 has to show proof of vaccination, and what got my attention was New York and Seattle said that they will adopt the same plan. That's on Fox News, you can find that. So now you're going to have to make sure that your kid, 5 years old, has proof of vaccination or they cannot do anything indoor. Well, guess what's indoors? School is, isn't it? Yeah. Everything's indoors. You want to take them into the supermarket, you got to have them vaccinated. That's where it's headed. But I'm going to read you one of my favorite verses, Philippians 3:13, before we go. It says, "Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended." It means I ain't got there yet. That's what Paul says. I'm not where I want to be. "But this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before." Let's stay positive. Like Paul says, let's look forward and not backward, right? There's nothing that we can do about that. We can't change the past. So let's just remember that, and maybe we can get back on a good routine next week. Maybe we can have everything updated and do things like we need to do it. But thank you guys for listening. Y'all go to church Sunday, and y'all try to keep reading your Bible. Thanks, guys.